In this video, I'm going to explain what bridging loans are, when they make sense, and why they only become dangerous when the deal or the exit strategy is wrong. Okay, so first and foremost, bridging loans are typically used for speed and repositioning. Okay, for me, I've used bridging loans for many, many years now, and it is a great way to get fast money. It's a great way to be able to win deals by being able to say to people you're effectively a cash buyer and you can complete an exchange within a very short window. Some days, some deals can be 14 days, some can be 28, 36, that sort of region. Okay, the thing with the bridging loan is, though, it is not long-term debt. All right, so you cannot treat it as long-term debt. You must have a clear exit strategy to get off a bridging loan in the fastest time possible, because they are quite expensive. However, they do serve a purpose. I'm going to show you exactly why you shouldn't let the interest or the costs put you off actually engaging in this strategy. One of the biggest mistakes that I made back in my early days, I bought a property at an auction, and it was before I used bridging loans, and I was scared of them. So I got a mortgage product, and the mortgage took 3 to 4 months to go through. And then I ended up paying fees because I didn't complete on time. Because obviously, when you buy through an auction, you have to typically complete within about a 30-day period, sometimes about 56 days, depending on the type of auction. So that was when I then discovered bridging loans and a faster way to refinance, and understood that I'd done it totally wrong and I could have actually saved myself a lot of money by using it. But you also need a clear refurb and refinance plan. All right. In my previous video that I just did, I talked about BRR and how that kind of works. And it's really, really important that you understand your numbers. The biggest thing, or the biggest mistake that I see most property investors making, is they don't really understand how much a project costs to put together, and they don't really get their end value correct. Now, don't get me wrong, I still sometimes get the end value incorrect. I think you can be subject to certain valuers. Some will give you good valuations, some will give you poor valuations. That's just the way it is. Sometimes the economy might be squeezing, and then the lenders might tighten up a bit, so the valuers kind of fall in suit as well. So there's many factors that can affect that end valuation. But all you got to do is take a sort of 85 to 90% gamble, and know that most times you will get it there or thereabouts. So I always work on like worst case scenarios. Okay, and if the deal works on worst case scenarios, then hopefully you're only ever going to get a better outcome, should we say. So let me just explain. I'll just bring up my iPad here. So a bridging loan, what we would do is, let's say, for example, we wanted to buy a house with 100,000. Okay, the purchase price is 100,000. What you would do is the bridging loan, you typically get about 70%. There are some companies that'll give you a bit more. I tend to use Together Finance, and they offer me 70%. So I have had 75 and 80%. I've also had 60 and 65 when it was COVID, but typically 70% is a good number. So 30,000 would be your input into this. So that would be your deposit. And then ultimately they'll give you the difference, the 70,000. Now, they will charge a lot more fees than, say, a typical mortgage. So you're going to be looking at somewhere between 1 to 1.25% per month. Okay. And this is why it's really important that you have to get off the bridge quickly, because you don't want to be paying 1.5% every single month for 24 months, 36 months, so on and so forth. So my typical project time frame is about 4 to 7 months. Okay. Now, when I have finished the project, I'm already ahead of the game, and I will start the refinance before we've actually finished and gone live, so that by the time the valuer comes out, we're not wasting any time. And this really makes a difference to how much extra money you will pay to a bridging loan versus having it on a mortgage product, which is a cheaper interest rate, and then ultimately putting more profit in your bank account. But typically, I am off a bridge within around that 7 month mark. Okay, so from the day I take the keys and take the bridge out, by 7 months, I am off it, and then I'm onto a cheaper, more long-term mortgage product. But it serves a purpose because it allows me to get going very quick. Now, including the fees, obviously there's typically 1% application fee and a 1% exit fee, which you'll pay. That is based on the total loan amount. So obviously the loan amount here is 70,000. Remember, we're putting 30,000 in, so we're only borrowing 70,000 from them. And then in terms of making sure that you can get off, it's very simple. All you have to do is get your mortgage, and then your mortgage in principle. So you're going to get a mortgage that will then pay off the bridging loan. They'll satisfy the fact that, again, a bit like the BRR strategy with a private investor, they'll have a title deed charge, so they'll release that charge from your title deed, and then ultimately the mortgage company can come on, and then you will be able to exchange that debt for the longer term cheaper debt. Okay, now For me, this works incredibly well for BRR because it allows you to work at speed. And what I've found over the years is like the deals need, like, especially if you're buying auctions or even if you're buying through estate agents, the fact that you can say, listen, I can complete in the next 30 days. I can have funds, within the next 14 days if you want to complete quicker. That is a massive benefit. All right. Than saying, oh, well, I'm going to have to get a mortgage and I'm going to have to, 3, 4 months, because that's how a traditional residential sale occurs. So if someone sells to a residential buyer, then know they're going to have a 3 to 4 month cycle before they can actually get the funds. Whereas if you're saying, listen, I can give you these funds in 30 days, we can get it completed, and it's not going to fall through, so on and so forth. It gives you that extra position to be able to, or should I say, gives you that extra power to be able to negotiate and get a better deal. All right. Now, as I said earlier, in terms of being on a bridge, you don't want to be on them for too long. The typical bridge term that I will take out will be 0 to 12 months. So I'll take a 12-month term. And then what happens is, if I do not get off this bridge within the 12 month, then there are penalties. All right. And they can be quite costly. All right. So even on something like £100,000 borrowing or £70,000 borrowing, you'd be looking at probably somewhere between 2,500 and 4,500 in penalties. And then the interest will go up and you'll continue to pay that that higher interest until you actually get off. Now, the reasons that some people cannot get off the bridge is, one, the DUV, the done up value. So that's what, when we have finished that project, we then get the lender out. We ideally want it to be somewhere like 150,000, so that when we can then refinance off on 75%, it's going to be, let me just quickly calculate that, 112,500. And then obviously we then use that 112,500 to pay the bridge and loan 70 grand. And then the difference goes in our back pocket to be able to cover any of the, the deposit that we put in, or the refurb costs, so on and so forth, stamp duty, etc. Now, that's how it works. Now, where it would fall down is, let's say, for example, you bought that house for 100 grand and then you only got, let's say, instead of the 150, you got somewhere like 110,000. Then obviously you're going to get 110,000 times 75%. Obviously, 75% is the loan amount that the mortgage company will give you. 70% is what a bridge and loan will give you in terms of loan to value. Don't get that confused. That would only give you 82,500. So actually, in this example, you would still be able to pay off your bridge and loan of 70,000. So it actually still works. But what will probably happen in that case is you're going to end up tying up a lot of money in terms of the refurb costs, etc. For example, let's say your refurb cost was 40,000. You've bought the property for 100,000, so your costs on that are going to be somewhere like 5k stamp plus probably, let's say, 2k legals. All right, so you're in that for 7k. So you've put 47k cash into that deal, and you're only getting 12 and a half back out. Well, you're going to only be left with about, what is 33,000, whatever it is. Math brain's not working well today. 33,000 is going to get tied up in that deal. Now, on my strategy, obviously, I make around 2k per month net profit from, the contractor B&Bs that I operate. So we would be looking at something like, 16, 17 months before I'd have that initial 33k back in my coffers to be able to use again. So obviously you want to try and get the least amount of money tied up as possible, so that you can continue to move forward and continue to get more and more contractor B&Bs, so that you can keep basically collecting these 2k a month from every single, property that you create. You create 4 of them, 2k a month times 4 is obviously, just shy of 100k per year net income. And I'm pretty sure that works for most people. All right. And that is literally what can happen with bridge and finance. Now, the other thing to note is, there are 2 interest types with bridge and finance. You have rolled up and you have retained. Okay. So depending on your credibility, your credit ratings, your income, there's various factors that they will take into consideration: length of time that you've had your company, things like that. It will dictate whether you get rolled up or retained interest. Okay. So basically, if they retain the interest, then out of the, let's say in our example here, so they were going to lend 70,000. Let's just say, for argument's sake, keeping it very quick, that the fees are 15,000 all in for 12 months worth of interest. All right. So they're actually not going to pay you out the 70,000. Okay, they're going to retain the interest as well. Basically, they're protecting their position to say, well, we're not actually sure whether the income stacks or they've got enough credibility, but we're willing to take a punt because bridge and loan is a lot easier to get acceptances for because it is a lot higher risk, and therefore that's why they charge higher rates. So they have to also then drop their barriers slightly versus, say, a mortgage lender where it's very stringent. So what they will do is say, right, well, we're not 100% on you, but we're still going to take a chance. But we want to keep the interest back. So what they'll basically do is instead of paying you out the 70,000, they'll pay you out 55,000. So you're going to have to find that extra 15% in terms of the cash input to be able to actually get this deal done. Now, you're probably thinking, well, you said that you get off these projects in 7 months, yet they're keeping back 12 months. Correct. When you refinance at month 7, what they will basically do is they'll just recalculate, and then they will basically issue back the difference. So the extra 6 months that I haven't used that they retain from me, they'll just issue that back, and then that comes back to me. So you're not actually paying for the full 12 months if you don't use the full 12 months. It's still in your interest to get off. What you then have is the other option, which is typically what I do, is you get the full 70,000, and then you pay, let's just say for argument's sake, it's 1% a month, and then basically you'll just have a monthly payment that services that debt, and then at the end of the project, you basically have your 70K to pay back plus the exit fees that they will charge you, and then from all of that process, you then own that property. You've then got your long-term mortgage on, and then ultimately, you operate it as such. So that's kind of how bridge and loans work. It's a very, very powerful strategy. You should not use long-term debt for short-term borrowing. So, make sure that you do have the right funding. You can also mix bridge and loans with private investors, or bridge and loans with your own cash. There's various different ways that you can use bridge and loans. And the more that you can, improve your financial IQ with regards to property investing, obviously the better it is, the greater you're going to go, the faster you're going to move, and the more projects that you're going to be able to operate on. So what I'm going to show you in the next video is, like, I'm going to explain how investor funding actually works and why good deals attract money without needing to be very pitchy or convincing, or certainly not salesy.